Let's look at where people go to survive resets. There have been at least 5 resets and people prepared to survive the last one. These so-called asylums were reset centers. Mainstream history states that they started building these asylums during the Civil War. Oregon became a state in 1859, yet they supposedly needed an insane asylum this big in 1862. Another massive one built in Alabama during the Civil War. These buildings were not for the clinically insane. They were either some sort of government building or hotel from the previous civilization before colonization. They were repurposed into fallout shelters or survival compounds. They were completely self-sustaining and off-grid. Many old world buildings were repurposed into survival shelters. This looks like a state capitol, not an insane asylum. These are palatial, ultra-remote palaces, basically. Supposedly they were built as a part of the Kirkbride plan. Supposedly he didn't like the conditions of the clinically insane. But people were thrown into these asylums for a bunch of arbitrary reasons, including novel reading. They had been basically chaining people up for these reasons since the 1200s. People were chained up for thought crimes up until 1800. And there was profit in it because it's human trafficking. After the last major reset, people survived in these compounds, and then there were reset wars. The surviving fighters that were captured were thrown in these prisons. This is the Philadelphia State Penitentiary. This is a castle. If nobody told you this was a prison, you'd say it's a castle. Folsom State Prison in California, castle. West Virginia, this looks like Hogwarts. Utah, this is a castle. Kansas City, this looks like a state capitol. And we have the Civil Reset War with its internment camps. And many of the people that didn't keep quiet about the fake Civil War were thrown in a soldier's home. And their children were taken and thrown in orphan asylums. The so-called colored orphan asylums were for the Aboriginals. The others were part of the orphan train and incubator baby campaigns. Many asylums were used as harems to produce these incubator babies. These were repopulation campaigns to fill the empty cities. The first wave of drones after the reset were sent in to extirpate the Aboriginal remnant. Generations of drones training drones, each generation knowing less than the last. Slavery was legalized after the Civil War with the 13th Amendment. You can legally enslave someone if you send them to prison or an asylum. Then the Rockefellers get involved with a chemical outpatient system. This leads us to Thorazine, or chemical control through dopamine receptors. Big money. It was used for anesthesia. It essentially makes you sleepwalk, or neuroleptic. They then proceeded to shut most of the asylums down because the world had become an asylum in itself. Prisons are a cashless society, and because these pesticides and herbicides and fungicides are basically subtle Thorazine, and the fake foods that contribute to inflammation and obesity do the same thing as well. They destroy the flow of neuromelanin, which numbs us into oblivion. Then the Bushes unleashed Hinckley on Reagan, and that was the death blow for insane asylums. But reset prep didn't stop. Zorro Ranch is an example of modern-day orphan asylums, just part of the perpetual parasite loop. The reset and Clone Wars. X-Men is actually more fact than fiction. Mutants taking over. Same thing with Hogwarts. This is clearly a depiction of meltology. Look at all the meltology in the foundation of this building. There's a reset, and then reset wars, and then the Aboriginal prisoners of war become enslaved. And then the identity theft proceeds.